All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Sharona Coutts. Sharona is an investigative reporter and the director of investigations and research at RH Reality Check, which you can find at rhrealitycheck.org. You can also find her on Twitter at Sharona Coutts. Sharona, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so Sharona, you actually compiled recently a really great report at RH Reality Check on the safety and regulation of abortions in the United States. Before we get to the actual content, tell the people where the information that you actually had to compile actually came from and how you actually came about all this information.
Be glad to. So basically, This is one of those stories that was an accidentally funny tale. So what happened was, back in May, anti-choice Republican members of two congressional committees got the brilliant idea that they were going to go on a nationwide fishing expedition, thinking that they were going to dig up more examples of horrible, criminal, rogue abortion providers like the convicted murderer Kermit Gosnell, who worked at a couple of clinics mostly outside of Philadelphia for a long time and did disgusting, revolting, illegal, terrible things and is now serving a life sentence. So part of the rhetoric of anti-choice campaigners, activists and politicians has been to try to tell the American public that rather than being a criminal and a rogue, Gosnell is actually the norm in abortion care. And the problem that they had was they really didn't have any evidence for that claim. So what they decided to do was to go and try and find it. So these anti-choice Republicans actually went and wrote letters to every health department and every attorney general in every state and also in DC. Mm-hmm. And they asked for basically everything that those state agencies had when it came to the oversight of abortion care. So the one set of letters came from the Committee on Energy and Commerce, and those ones went to the health department. And they wanted information about how many abortion clinics do you have, how do you categorize them, how often do you inspect them, how do you inspect them, show us the forms, what do the inspectors need to do, who are the inspectors, how many complaints have you had against facilities, how many complaints have you had against doctors, how many complaints have you had against nurses, how many incidents do you have of professionals being disciplined for terrible things they've done in the course of an abortion. The second set came from the House Judiciary Committee, and they sent their letters to all the attorneys general. And obviously, given that they went to a law enforcement type entity, they were looking for prosecutions. So they wanted to find information about what are your laws relating to feticide? What are your laws relating to this completely mythical thing that is used as a fear-mongering thing called born alive abortions, which I'll talk about later on because that is a really ridiculous myth and it's horrifying, but it's a myth. And they also wanted to know how many times have you prosecuted abortion providers, all this sort of stuff. So clearly they're looking for other Gosnells. Now, here we come to the kind of, I suppose, weirdly comical element. They've accidentally, in trying to find examples of how horrible and dangerous abortion care is, they've accidentally kicked an own goal by accidentally proving that according to the available evidence, abortion is ridiculously safe. When we're talking about systems, we're talking about what is really indicative of what's going on in most states. And I got my hands on most of these answers that all these different state health departments and attorneys general provided. And most of them, they paint a picture of a very proactive, aggressive regime of overseeing, monitoring and regulating abortion services. But at the same time, they basically didn't find any systematic problems. So, what we now can prove is what, legitimate abortion providers have been saying for decades, well, actually mostly the last couple of decades, is abortion is overwhelmingly safe. Yes, there are rogues, but there are rogues in a lot of professions. And, when a dentist is convicted for sexually assaulting a patient, no one calls for dentistry to be banned.
Exactly. Not that all dentists do that type of thing, because of course all dentists don't do that type of thing.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's basically kind of where we got the documents and the overview of what they show, and people can have a look. I mean, the thing I love about these kind of data journalism projects is your listeners don't have to believe, they don't have to take my word for it. This is not my opinion. This is based on the documents, and so we just made them public. Have a look. We want people to see them because we're telling the truth, unlike the anti-choice activists and campaigns and politicians who twist facts and engage in really serious fear-mongering and peddling in myths to try and scare people. So have a look at the documents.